The trauma bay doors exploded open at Riverside General, and what stumbled through shouldn't have been walking. A man, more blood than person, collapsed across the linoleum while alarms shrieked like dying animals. Doctors froze. Nurses screamed. And in the middle of that beautiful chaos, a woman nobody remembered hiring stepped forward and gave an order that made the entire emergency room go silent. Airway secured in 30 seconds, or he's dead. Move. Her voice didn't ask. It commanded. And every single person in that room obeyed without thinking, including the chief of medicine who'd spent the last 3 weeks trying to fire her. Because Madison Cole wasn't just some quiet nurse they could ignore anymore. Before we dive in, if you're loving this story, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this journey has traveled. Now, let's get back to the moment everything changed. Madison Cole had been invisible for exactly 19 days. 19 days of morning shifts at Riverside General Hospital in Ashford Heights, a sprawling medical center that serviced 3 counties and treated invisibility like a job requirement for anyone below attending physician. 19 days of keeping her head down, her scrubs clean, her mouth shut. 19 days of watching doctors bark orders at nurses who'd been saving lives since before those same doctors graduated high school. She'd learned the rhythm fast. Show up early, chart accurately, respond to pages, smile when senior staff made jokes at your expense, disappear when egos needed room to expand. It should have been simple. It would have been simple if Madison had been anyone else. But 20 years of training doesn't wash off just because you trade combat boots for Crocs. And muscle memory doesn't care about hospital politics. The morning it all fell apart started ordinary enough. Madison arrived at 6:15, changed into navy scrubs that had seen better days, and tied her blonde hair back tight enough to give her a headache by noon. The ER was already humming, chest pain in Bay 2, possible stroke in 4, a kid who'd shoved a Lego up his nose in 6. Dr. Richard Kern stood at the nurse's station, holding court like always. 53, silver-haired, with the kind of voice that made every sentence sound like a TED Talk, whether he was ordering labs or asking about the weather. He'd run Riverside's emergency department for 8 years, and he ran it the way generals ran wars, total authority, zero tolerance for contradiction. Morning, Cole. He didn't look up from the tablet he was scrolling through. Morning, Dr. Kern. Bed 3 needs a catheter. Bed 7's family won't stop asking questions. Handle it. Yes, sir. She moved before he could add anything else, slipping past the controlled chaos of the main floor toward bed 3. The patient, elderly man, post-op confusion, didn't make eye contact when she introduced herself. Standard. Most people looked through nurses like they were furniture with pulses. Madison worked methodically. Gloves on, supplies prepped, explanation given even though the patient wasn't listening. Insert, secure, chart, done. Bed 7 was louder. A woman in her 40s stood outside the curtain, arms crossed, face tight with the kind of anger that comes from fear nobody's acknowledging. Her husband was inside, possible MY, waiting on cardiology. Nobody's telling me anything, the woman said before Madison could speak. He's been here 2 hours, and I don't even know if he's dying. Madison kept her voice level. Dr. Kern ordered an EKG and troponin levels. We're waiting on cardiology to review the results. As soon as we know more, that's what the last nurse said. I understand. It's frustrating. Frustrating? The woman's voice climbed. My husband can't breathe and you people are acting like he's got a cold. Madison glanced through the curtain gap. The man inside looked stable. Color decent, oxygen sat holding at 94%. No visible distress. Not great, but not crashing either. Ma'am, I know this is scary, but right now his vitals are stable and the tests we're running will tell us exactly what we're dealing with. I promise someone will update you the second we have answers. The woman stared at her like she was deciding whether to believe it. Then her expression cracked. Just a little. He's all I have. I know. Madison's voice softened without her meaning it to. We're taking care of him. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either because hospitals didn't take care of people. They processed them, efficiently or not, successfully or not. And the difference between those outcomes often came down to who was paying attention when things went sideways. Madison had seen what happened when nobody was. She was turning to leave when the woman grabbed her wrist. You'll check on him, not just, you'll actually check. Madison nodded. Every 20 minutes until cardiology comes down. The woman let go. Madison walked back to the nurse's station and added a note to her mental checklist, the one that ran parallel to every official chart and never got written down anywhere. Bed 7. Watch for rhythm changes. Bed 3. Recheck orientation in an hour. Bed 2. Nitro protocol if chest pain returns. She was 2 steps from the station when Dr. Kern's voice cut across the department. Cole, trauma incoming. You're up. Madison's stomach dropped. She'd been dodging traumas since her second day, always managing to be in the middle of something else when the call came through. Not because she couldn't handle it. She'd handled worse in places where the nearest surgeon was a helicopter ride away and half the supplies were expired. But because trauma made you visible. Trauma made people watch. And the last thing Madison needed was people watching too close. But there wasn't time to deflect now. The ambulance bay doors slammed open and chaos rolled in on a gurney. The patient was young, maybe 25, and covered in enough blood that identifying the source felt like guesswork. EMTs rattled off vitals while jogging alongside the stretcher. Motor vehicle accident, ejected from vehicle, unrestrained. GCS 8 at scene dropped to 6 en route. BP's tanking, 80/40, last check. We've got 2 large-bore IVs running wide open, but he's shocky and we can't find the bleed. Dr. Kern stepped forward, already snapping orders. Get him to Trauma 1. I need X-ray type and cross for 6 units and someone page surgery now. The gurney crashed through the trauma bay doors and everything became noise. Monitors screaming, staff shouting, equipment clattering, Dr. Kern trying to establish control while 3 nurses and 2 residents collided over who was doing what. Somebody bag him. I need suction here. Where the hell is anesthesia? Madison moved on instinct. She didn't think about it, didn't plan it. 20 years of training just kicked in like flipping a switch, and suddenly she wasn't in Riverside General anymore. She was back in a field hospital outside Kandahar, with mortar fire shaking the tent walls, and a kid bleeding out on a cot because the convoy hit an IED and there were 7 more just like him waiting. Her hands moved. Airway first. Somebody get me a laryngoscope and an 8O tube. One of the residents blinked at her. What? Now. Her voice didn't rise, didn't need to. The resident grabbed the equipment. Madison positioned herself at the head of the bed, tilted the patient's head back, and slid the laryngoscope blade in with the kind of precision that only comes from doing it 100 times under worse conditions. Vocal cords. Tube through. Cuff inflated. Bag attached. Ventilate 15 breaths per minute. She moved to the patient's side, hands already scanning for the bleed everyone else had missed. Left chest. Bruising, possible rib fractures. Abdomen, distended, rigid. She pressed gently on the upper right quadrant and the patient's blood pressure dropped another 10 points. Liver lac, Madison said. Probably grade 3 or higher. He needs surgery 5 minutes ago. Dr. Kern stared at her. How do you... Fast exam. Someone get ultrasound in here. A nurse wheeled the machine over. Madison grabbed the probe, squirted gel across the patient's abdomen, and pressed the transducer just below the rib cage. The screen lit up with exactly what she expected. Free fluid in Morrison's pouch, dark and spreading. There's your bleed. He's hemorrhaging into his abdomen. We need to move now, or he's not making it to the OR. Dr. Kern didn't move. He just stood there, staring at Madison like she'd sprouted a second head. Then his face went red. Who the hell do you think you are? The trauma bay went quiet. Madison looked up from the ultrasound. I'm sorry? You're a nurse, Cole. You assist. You don't diagnose. You don't give orders. And you sure as hell don't override my authority in my ER. Madison's jaw tightened. With respect, Dr. Kern, this patient is dying. We can argue about hierarchy later. We'll argue about it now. Kern stepped closer, voice dropping to something colder than a shout. You just committed about 6 protocol violations and made me look incompetent in front of my staff. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to step away from that patient, return to your assigned duties, and when this shift is over, you're going to meet with administration to explain why you shouldn't be terminated for insubordination. Madison didn't move. He's got maybe 10 minutes before he exsanguinates. Then I suggest you let me do my job. For a long second, Madison didn't breathe. She just looked at Dr. Kern, at the residents watching, at the nurses who'd gone still and silent because they'd all learned the same lesson she was learning right now. Competence didn't matter if you didn't know your place. She stepped back. Dr. Kern took over, barking orders that should have been given 5 minutes ago. And by the time the patient rolled toward the OR, his pressure had dropped to 70 over 30, and his lips were turning blue. Madison walked out of the trauma bay, stripped off her gloves, and kept walking until she hit the staff bathroom at the end of the hall. She locked the door, sat down on the closed toilet lid, and pressed her palms against her knees hard enough to leave marks. Her hands weren't shaking. They should have been. Normal people's hands shook after something like that. But Madison's hands had stopped shaking a long time ago, in places where shaking got people killed. She stayed in that bathroom for 6 minutes. Then she stood up, washed her face, and went back to work. The rest of the shift blurred together. Bed checks, med passes, discharge paperwork. Dr. Kern didn't speak to her again, but she felt him watching, felt the weight of every mistake he was cataloging, every reason he was building to justify what came next. At 3:30, her supervisor appeared. Janet Ruiz, head nurse, 40 years old and tired in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. Madison, director's office. Now. Madison followed her down 2 hallways and through a door marked Administration. The office inside was small, efficient, decorated with motivational posters that nobody ever read. Behind the desk sat Patricia Holloway, Riverside General's director of nursing, a woman whose entire career had been built on keeping doctors happy and nurses compliant. Dr. Kern was already there. Patricia didn't waste time. Ms. Cole, Dr. Kern has filed a formal complaint regarding your conduct during this morning's trauma. He's alleging insubordination, protocol violations, and unauthorized medical intervention. Madison kept her face neutral. I stabilized a patient. You overstepped your scope of practice, Kern said, and you did it in front of my entire team, undermining my authority and creating a dangerous precedent. The patient was hemorrhaging. Someone needed to, someone did, Kern interrupted. Me. I'm the attending physician. You're a registered nurse with less than a month at this facility. Your job is to follow orders, not question my clinical judgment. Patricia folded her hands on her desk. Ms. Cole, I've reviewed your personnel file. Your performance evaluations have been adequate, but you've received multiple informal warnings about maintaining professional boundaries. This incident represents a serious escalation. I saved that patient's life. You intervened without authorization, Patricia said, and regardless of outcome, that's unacceptable. Madison felt something cold settle in her chest. So what happens now? Patricia glanced at Dr. Kern, then back at Madison. Effective immediately, you're suspended pending a full investigation. You'll surrender your badge and be escorted from the premises. If the investigation concludes that your actions constituted gross misconduct, your employment will be terminated. The room went quiet. Madison had known it was coming, had felt it building since the moment she stepped into that trauma bay, but knowing didn't make it easier. Understood, she said. She unclipped her badge and set it on Patricia's desk. Nobody spoke while she walked out. Janet was waiting in the hallway. I'll walk you to your locker. They moved through the hospital in silence, past the ER where Madison had spent the last 19 days trying to be invisible, past the trauma bay where she'd broken that invisibility in the worst possible way. Her locker was in the staff changing room, third from the left, combination lock she'd set to her enlistment date without thinking about it. She opened it, grabbed her jacket, her bag, her civilian shoes. Janet watched her. For what it's worth, you were right. That kid would have died if you hadn't pushed. Madison zipped her bag. Doesn't matter. It should. Yeah. Madison closed the locker. It should. She was halfway across the parking lot when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then instinct kicked in, and she picked up. Cole. The voice on the other end was clipped, professional, vaguely familiar. Lieutenant Cole, this is Captain Barnes, 4th Medical Battalion. I'm calling because we have a situation developing and your name came up as a resource in the area. Madison stopped walking. Captain, I've been out for 3 years. We're aware of your status. This isn't a recall. We just need information. Are you currently employed at Riverside General Hospital in Ashford Heights? I was. As of an hour ago, not anymore. A pause. Understood. Can you tell me if Riverside has level 1 trauma capabilities? Yes. Why? We've got a convoy coming through your area with a federal asset who took fire during a transport operation. He's critical and we need immediate surgical intervention. Nearest military facility is 90 minutes out. Riverside is 12. Madison's pulse kicked up. How critical? Gunshot wounds to the chest and abdomen. He's intubated and barely holding pressure. We're 10 minutes from your location. Captain, I don't work there anymore. I can't. You can consult. Off the record. We'll handle the jurisdictional paperwork later. Barnes's voice hardened. Lieutenant, I need to know if Riverside can handle this, or if I'm gambling this man's life on a civilian ER that's going to fall apart the second we roll in. Madison looked back at the hospital, at the building that had just thrown her out for doing exactly what she'd been trained to do. Then she thought about a kid bleeding out in a convoy, about the kind of chaos that was about to hit Riverside's front door, about Dr. Kern trying to run a mass casualty event with the same ego that nearly killed a patient this morning. Riverside can handle it, she said, but you're going to need someone who knows what they're doing. That's why I called you. I'm suspended, Captain. I don't have access. Then I suggest you find some, because that convoy is 8 minutes out and I don't have a plan B. The line went dead. Madison stood in the parking lot, bag over her shoulder, keys in her hand, staring at the hospital entrance 50 yards away. She should have kept walking, should have gotten in her car and gone home and let Riverside handle whatever was coming the way they always did. Badly, but with all the right paperwork. Instead, she dropped her bag, turned around, and started running. She hit the ER entrance at a full sprint, badgeless and suspended and completely unauthorized to be there. The front desk clerk looked up in surprise. Ms. Cole, I thought you... Military convoy incoming, multiple GSWs. Where's Dr. Kern? The clerk's face went pale. He's in a staff meeting. Page him, now, and clear trauma 1 and 2. But you don't have authorization to... Madison didn't wait to hear the rest. She pushed through the double doors into the ER, already scanning the department, already running numbers in her head. Trauma bays, supplies, personnel. They had maybe 6 minutes to prep before everything went sideways. She grabbed the nearest nurse, Amy, young, barely a year out of school. Listen to me. We're about to get hit with a federal trauma case and probably more behind it. I need you to pull every trauma cart we have and stage them outside bays 1 and 2. Go. Amy hesitated. Dr. Kern said you were suspended. Amy, people are going to die if we're not ready. Move. Amy moved. Madison kept going, pulling nurses and residents into position, calling out orders that 3 weeks ago nobody would have followed, but now they were scared enough and confused enough that they just obeyed. She was setting up the airway station when Dr. Kern appeared, face purple with rage. What the hell are you doing back in my ER? Madison didn't look up from the equipment she was organizing. Military convoy, 2 minutes out. Critical patient with penetrating chest trauma. You're going to need... I don't need anything from you except an explanation for why you're still on hospital property after being suspended. Dr. Kern, security. He turned toward the hallway. I need security in the ER immediately. The ambulance bay doors crashed open, and the screaming started, not from the patient, from the radio. Riverside, this is Medevac 1. Be advised, incident at the interstate junction has resulted in mass casualty event. We have a military transport with critical federal asset, plus approximately 15 civilian vehicles involved in chain reaction collision. Multiple codes. Multiple traumas. ETA 3 minutes, and we are not equipped to handle this volume. Repeat. We are not equipped. The transmission cut to static. Dr. Kern's face went white. Madison looked at him. You want to keep arguing, or you want to save lives? For 1 second, Dr. Kern just stood there. Then the first gurney exploded through the doors and everything became screaming chaos. The federal asset came in first, security detail shouting, radios crackling, a man in tactical gear covered in blood being rushed toward Trauma 1. Behind him, more gurneys, more blood. A teenage girl with a steering column through her chest. An elderly man seizing. A woman holding her own intestines in place with a jacket. The ER shattered. Nurses collided. Residents froze. Dr. Kern tried to give orders, but his voice got lost in the noise, drowned out by alarms and screaming and the wet, terrible sounds of people dying faster than anyone could stop it. Madison watched it fall apart for exactly 5 seconds. Then something inside her made a choice. Her posture changed. Her voice changed. Everything about her shifted from invisible nurse to something else entirely, something that had kept soldiers alive in places where chaos was just another word for Tuesday. "Listen up," her voice cut through the screaming like a blade. "Triage protocol now. Red tags to trauma 1 and 2. Yellow tags to bays 3 through 6. Green tags to the waiting room. Black tags stay in the hallway. Nobody moves without my clearance. If you don't know what you're doing, find someone who does and follow their orders. We're running mass casualty protocol, and we're running it by the book. Move!" The chaos broke. Staff stopped colliding and started organizing. Nurses grabbed triage tags. Residents took positions. Even Dr. Kern went quiet, staring at Madison like he'd never seen her before. Because he hadn't. Nobody had. Madison moved through the department like she'd done this 1,000 times. Because she had. Assigning roles, redirecting resources, calling out changes before monitors registered them. She was everywhere and nowhere, a constant presence holding the entire department together through nothing but sheer force of will and training nobody knew she had. She was stabilizing the federal asset, tension pneumothorax, chest tube inserted before anyone else even identified the problem, when the doors opened again. This time, it wasn't an ambulance. It was military personnel in dress uniforms. 4 of them, moving through the chaos with the kind of precision that made everyone else look like they were moving through water. They stopped at the trauma bay entrance. The ranking officer stepped forward, silver oak leaves, 40-something, face like carved stone. He scanned the room, found Madison, and saluted. "Lieutenant Cole," he said. "Colonel Davidson, 4th Medical Battalion. We need your assessment." The entire ER went silent. Madison stood there, hands still bloody from the chest tube, hair falling out of its tie, scrubs soaked through with someone else's blood. Dr. Kern stared at her. "Lieutenant?" The colonel didn't break eye contact with Madison. "We've been monitoring the situation. Captain Barnes briefed me on your status. Given the circumstances, I'm requesting your assistance with the federal asset and any overflow cases requiring advanced trauma protocols." Madison's throat went dry. "Colonel, I'm currently suspended from... I'm aware. I'm also aware that you're the ranking trauma specialist in this building and the only person here with combat medical experience. So I'm asking, Lieutenant, can you help us?" Every eye in the department was on her. Dr. Kern's face had gone from purple to gray. Madison looked at the colonel, at the federal asset fighting for every breath, at the chaos still swirling through the ER despite her best efforts to contain it. Then she straightened her shoulders and gave the only answer she had. "Yes, sir." The colonel nodded. "Then consider yourself activated under emergency medical protocols. We'll handle the paperwork." He turned to Dr. Kern. "Doctor, we appreciate your facility's cooperation. Lieutenant Cole will coordinate trauma response for military-related cases. Your staff will handle civilian overflow. Questions?" Dr. Kern's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. Patricia Holloway appeared in the hallway, eyes wide, phone pressed to her ear. She looked at Madison, at the colonel, at the department that had somehow transformed from chaos to controlled urgency. "What's happening?" Patricia whispered. Madison met her eyes. "I'm doing my job." And for the first time in 19 days, nobody told her to stop. The federal asset's name was Marcus Webb, and he was dying in increments. Madison could see it in the monitor readings that kept dropping despite everything she was doing. Blood pressure hovering at 85 systolic, heart rate climbing into the 130s, oxygen saturation dipping every time she looked away. The chest tube she'd placed was draining dark blood at a rate that meant internal bleeding hadn't stopped, just slowed. She worked quickly, hands moving through protocols she could execute blind. 2 more IV lines, wide bore, running O negative and saline. Pressure dressing on the abdominal wound that looked like something had torn through him rather than punched. Labs ordered. Imaging requested. Surgery team paged with the kind of urgency that made people move. Colonel Davidson stood 3 feet away, watching everything with the detached precision of someone who'd seen this before. His security detail had taken positions around the trauma bay, armed and alert in a way that made the civilian staff deeply uncomfortable. "Talk to me, Lieutenant," Davidson said. Madison didn't look up from the arterial line she was placing. 2 GSWs, entry wounds anterior chest and right upper quadrant abdomen. Exit wound posterior chest suggests through and through, but the abdominal round is still inside him. Possible liver involvement. Definite lung involvement. He needs surgery now, but he's too unstable to move. How long to stabilize? Depends on whether he's still bleeding into his abdomen. Madison finished securing the line and reached for the ultrasound probe. If that liver lac is active, surgery's happening whether he's stable or not. She ran the probe across Webb's abdomen. The screen showed exactly what she didn't want to see. Free fluid, more than before, spreading through spaces it shouldn't be filling. He's hemorrhaging, Madison said. We need to get him upstairs in the next 5 minutes, or we're doing this procedure in the ER. Davidson pulled out his phone, spoke quietly into it, then turned back to Madison. Surgical team is 2 minutes out. Can you hold him that long? I can try. She increased the pressure infusion rate, pushed another unit of blood, and watched Webb's numbers with the kind of focus that made the rest of the world disappear. Somewhere beyond the trauma bay, the ER was still chaos. Civilian casualties being triaged and treated, families screaming for information, staff running on adrenaline and terror. But in this room, right now, there was just Madison and a man who'd taken bullets meant for someone else. Lieutenant? One of Davidson's security team stepped closer. The shooter? Not now, Cortez, Davidson said, but Madison had already heard it. The shooter. Which meant this wasn't random, meant Webb had been targeted, meant somewhere out there someone had tried to kill a federal asset and maybe succeeded depending on what happened in the next 10 minutes. The surgical team arrived in a blur of green scrubs and controlled urgency. Dr. Sarah Chen, no, Madison caught herself, not Chen, someone else. Dr. Sarah Brennan, lead trauma surgeon, early 40s, reputation for being brilliant and ruthless in equal measure. She took one look at the monitors and swore. He's barely holding pressure. Liver lac, Madison said. Active bleed, probable grade 4 or higher. Brennan's eyes snapped to Madison. You scope him? Ultrasound. Free fluid in all 4 quadrants. Then why the hell is he still down here? Brennan turned to her team. Get him to OR3 now. Call blood bank and tell them we need 10 units on standby. Move. They transferred Webb to the surgical gurney with the kind of speed that comes from knowing every second counts. Madison helped with the transition, keeping one hand on the ambu bag, maintaining ventilation until the last possible moment. Brennan stopped her as the team started rolling. Your combat medical? Was. Good. I need you upstairs. If he crashes on the table, I want someone who won't freeze. Madison glanced at Colonel Davidson. He nodded. Go, he said. We'll handle things down here. Madison followed the surgical team toward the elevators, still wearing bloody scrubs, still technically suspended, still moving on pure instinct because thinking meant questioning and questioning meant stopping. They were halfway across the ER when Dr. Kern appeared. His face had regained some color, but the shock hadn't left his eyes. Cole? What do you think you're doing? Madison didn't slow down. Going to surgery. You're suspended. You don't have... Colonel Davidson activated me under emergency medical protocols. Take it up with him. This is my hospital. Then maybe you should be running it instead of trying to stop the people who are. Madison pushed past him toward the elevator bay. Kern grabbed her arm. You just ended your career. Madison turned, looked at his hand on her arm, looked at his face. Let go. Something in her voice made him release her immediately. The elevator doors opened. Madison stepped inside. Kern stood in the hallway, watching her rise out of sight with an expression that promised consequences. The OR floor was controlled chaos. Nurses prepping rooms, anesthesiologists reviewing charts, the smell of antiseptic and the low hum of ventilation systems. Madison followed Brennan's team into OR3, where Webb was already being transferred to the surgical table. Scrub in, Brennan told her. You're assisting. Madison moved to the scrub station, methodically washing her hands and forearms with the kind of precision that had been drilled into her until it became automatic. Behind her, through the observation window, she could see the anesthesia team working, monitors being connected, ventilator settings adjusted. Webb's life being measured in numbers that kept threatening to flatline. She gowned and gloved with help from a surgical nurse who didn't ask questions, just worked. By the time Madison entered the OR, Brennan was already standing over Webb with a scalpel. Ready? Brennan asked. Madison took her position across the table. Ready. The scalpel came down and the surgery began. Blood welled immediately. Brennan worked with aggressive efficiency, cutting through layers of tissue, clamping vessels, calling for suction and retraction in a steady stream that Madison matched without thinking. This was different from field medicine, cleaner, more controlled. But the fundamentals were the same: bind the damage, stop the bleeding, keep the patient alive long enough to finish. Liver lac, Brennan confirmed. Grade 5. He's lucky to be breathing. She wasn't wrong. The injury was massive, a stellate fracture that had torn through 2 lobes and shredded the hepatic artery. Blood poured from the wound faster than suction could clear it. Pringle maneuver, Brennan said. I need to clamp the hepatic pedicle or we're going to lose him. Madison anticipated the request, already reaching for the vascular clamp before Brennan finished speaking. They worked in synchronized rhythm, Brennan's hands moving with surgical precision while Madison provided exposure and assistance. How long were you deployed? Brennan asked. 4 tours, 18 months total. Afghanistan? Mostly, some Iraq. Brennan placed the clamp and the bleeding slowed. Not stopped. It never stopped completely with injuries this severe, but controlled enough to work. You're good at this. Had a lot of practice. I can tell. Brennan started repairing the damaged tissue, suturing vessels, removing devitalized liver segments. Why'd you leave? Madison focused on the retractor she was holding. Got tired of watching kids die. So you became an ER nurse? Seemed quieter. Brennan laughed, sharp, humorless. How's that working out? Madison didn't answer. They worked for another 90 minutes, repairing the liver, exploring the chest wound, removing bullet fragments, placing drains. Webb's vitals climbed slowly, pressure stabilizing, heart rate dropping back toward normal ranges. Not out of danger, but no longer circling the drain. Finally, Brennan stepped back. Close him up. I need to talk to his people. She left Madison with the surgical resident and scrub nurse. They finished the closure in silence, layer by layer, until Webb was sutured and bandaged and ready for recovery. Madison stripped off her gown and gloves, disposed of them, and walked out of the OR with hands that still weren't shaking. Colonel Davidson was waiting in the hallway. How is he? Davidson asked. Alive, stable. Dr. Brennan will give you the full report. Davidson nodded slowly. Thank you, Lieutenant. You saved his life. Just doing the job, sir. That's what concerns me. Davidson studied her with the kind of intensity that made Madison want to look away. Captain Barnes mentioned you were recently separated from service. Medical discharge? Voluntary separation. After 4 tours in combat zones? Davidson's expression didn't change. That's unusual. Madison kept her face neutral. I was ready for something different. And you found it here? At Riverside? I thought I did. Davidson was quiet for a moment. Then he said, We're going to need a full debrief. The attack on Webb wasn't random. There's an active investigation, and your involvement in his care makes you a material witness. Understood. In the meantime, I'd recommend you stay close. Things are going to get complicated. He wasn't wrong. Madison returned to the ER to find it transformed. The mass casualty chaos had been replaced by controlled activity. Civilian patients being treated, families being updated, the kind of organized efficiency that only came after the worst had passed. But underneath the surface, tension hummed like a live wire. Staff watched Madison when they thought she wasn't looking. Whispered conversations stopped when she walked past. The suspension that had seemed absolute 3 hours ago now felt nebulous, undefined, complicated by the fact that she'd just helped save a federal asset's life in front of witnesses, including a full-bird colonel. Janet found her near the nurses' station. Patricia wants to see you. Now? 10 minutes ago. Madison walked to administration with the feeling of someone approaching an execution. Patricia's office looked the same as before. Same motivational posters, same efficient furniture. But Dr. Kern wasn't there this time. Instead, 2 men in suits occupied the guest chairs. Federal agents, obviously. The kind who wore their authority like cologne. Patricia looked like she'd aged 5 years in the last 3 hours. Ms. Cole, these gentlemen are from the Department of Justice. They'd like to ask you some questions about the incident. The older agent stood. Special Agent Thomas Reeves, DOJ. This is Agent Marcus Lynn. We understand you provided medical care to Marcus Webb during and after the attack. Madison remained standing. I did. We'd like to get your statement. Everything you saw, heard, and did from the moment you became aware of the situation. Am I being investigated? No, ma'am. You're a witness. But Webb's case is classified, and we need to establish a clear timeline. Madison glanced at Patricia, who looked like she desperately wanted to be anywhere else. I'll cooperate however I can. The interview lasted 40 minutes. Reeves asked questions with surgical precision. When did she first learn about the convoy? Who contacted her? What did she observe about Webb's injuries? Did anyone say anything about the attack itself? Madison answered everything factually, omitting nothing, adding nothing. When it was over, Reeves handed her a business card. If you remember anything else, call me directly. And Ms. Cole, don't discuss this case with anyone outside official channels. That includes media, family, friends. Understood? Understood. The agents left. Patricia sagged in her chair like someone had cut her strings. This is a nightmare, Patricia said quietly. Madison waited. Dr. Kern is demanding your termination. He's filed formal complaints with the medical board, the hospital board, and he's threatening legal action for insubordination and undermining his authority. Patricia rubbed her temples. But now we have federal agents asking questions, military personnel vouching for your competence, and a surgical team saying you helped save a federal asset's life. The optics are complicated. So what happens now? I don't know. Patricia looked at Madison with something that might have been sympathy. Your suspension stands pending investigation, but given the circumstances, I'm not sure what that investigation is going to conclude. This whole situation is unprecedented. Can I ask you something? Madison said. What? If I hadn't been here today, how many people would have died? Patricia's expression hardened. That's not fair. It's a simple question. The answer doesn't change hospital policy. No, Madison agreed, but it should. She left administration and went to collect her things from the staff locker room. Her bag was still where she'd dropped it in the parking lot. Someone had brought it inside, left it on the bench near her locker. She grabbed it, changed out of her bloody scrubs into civilian clothes, and walked toward the exit. Amy intercepted her near the ambulance bay. The young nurse looked exhausted, still wearing trauma-stained scrubs, hair falling out of its ponytail. Hey, Amy said, I just wanted to say thank you for earlier. I would have frozen if you hadn't told me what to do. Madison managed a tired smile. You did fine. I didn't, though. None of us did. We were falling apart until you took over. Amy hesitated. Is it true? That you were military? Yeah. Why didn't you tell anyone? Didn't seem relevant. Amy laughed, short, slightly bitter. Dr. Kern's been telling everyone you're dangerous, that you're unstable and you lied on your application and you shouldn't be allowed near patients. Madison's jaw tightened. What do you think? I think you saved lives today while he was having a panic attack in his office. Amy met her eyes. For what it's worth, some of us see what actually happened, and we're not going to forget it. She walked away before Madison could respond. Madison left the hospital through the emergency entrance, stepping into late afternoon sunlight that felt wrong after everything that had happened. The parking lot was full of news vans now, reporters setting up cameras, preparing for the kind of coverage that turned tragedies into entertainment. She was halfway to her car when someone called her name. Lieutenant Cole! Madison turned. A reporter was jogging toward her, cameraman in tow, microphone already extended. Lieutenant Cole, I'm Rebecca Torres with Channel 7 News. Can you comment on your role in today's events? Sources say you were instrumental in saving multiple lives, including a federal agent, despite being suspended from the hospital. Is that true? Madison kept walking. No comment. Is it true you're a decorated combat veteran, that you served multiple tours in Afghanistan? No comment. Dr. Richard Kern has accused you of dangerous misconduct. Do you have a response to those allegations? Madison stopped, turned, looked directly at the camera. I did my job, she said. That's all. She got in her car and drove away before Torres could ask anything else. The apartment Madison rented was small, cheap, and impersonal in the way of places people stayed temporarily while figuring out what came next. She'd been there 4 months and still hadn't unpacked half her boxes, hadn't hung pictures, hadn't done anything that suggested permanence. She dropped her bag by the door, walked to the kitchen, and pulled a beer from the refrigerator. drank half of it standing at the counter while her phone buzzed with messages she didn't want to read. Finally, she checked. 12 texts, 6 voicemails, 3 emails. Most were from reporters. 2 were from colleagues at Riverside offering support or asking questions. 1 was from a number she didn't recognize. She opened that one. Lieutenant Cole, Colonel Davidson. Need to meet tomorrow 0900, Federal Plaza, room 403. Not optional. Bring everything you remember about today. Madison set the phone down and finished her beer. Then she opened another one and tried very hard not to think about what tomorrow would bring. But sleep didn't come easy that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back in the trauma bay, back in the OR. Back in places where blood and chaos were normal, and the only thing that mattered was keeping people alive long enough to get them somewhere safer. She'd left the military because she thought she was done with that. Turned out, she'd just changed locations. Her phone rang at 11:30. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Cole. Ms. Cole, this is Dr. Brennan. I hope I'm not calling too late. Madison sat up. No, is Webb okay? He's stable, still critical but holding. That's not why I'm calling. Brennan paused. I spoke with Colonel Davidson. He told me what happened earlier. The suspension. It's complicated. It's bullshit, Brennan said flatly. Kern's a mediocre physician with an oversized ego, and he nearly got people killed today because he couldn't handle someone being more competent than him. Madison didn't know what to say to that. I'm testifying, Brennan continued, at whatever investigation they're running. I'm going to tell them exactly what I saw, which is that you performed at a level far beyond your stated qualifications, and you saved lives that would have been lost under standard protocols. Kern can file all the complaints he wants. The surgical record speaks for itself. Dr. Brennan? Sarah, and I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you what's happening. She paused. You're a good medic, Cole. Better than good. And this hospital needs people like you more than it needs people like Kern. Don't let them bury you because you made someone look bad. The line went dead. Madison sat in the dark, holding her phone, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. This morning she'd been invisible, suspended, pushed out. Now she was a witness in a federal investigation, a subject of hospital controversy, and apparently someone worth fighting for. She didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, Madison arrived at Federal Plaza at 8:45 wearing the closest thing she had to professional civilian clothes, dark pants, white blouse, jacket that didn't quite fit right. The building was all glass and steel and security checkpoints that made airport screening look casual. She cleared security, rode the elevator to the 4th floor, and found room 403. Colonel Davidson was already there, so were Agents Reeves and Lynn. And sitting at the head of the conference table was a woman Madison didn't recognize. 60-something, steel gray hair, wearing a suit that cost more than Madison's car. Lieutenant Cole, Davidson said. Thank you for coming. This is Deputy Director Ellen Vasquez, Department of Justice. Vasquez gestured to a chair. Please sit. We have a lot to discuss. Madison sat. Vasquez opened a folder, studied it for a moment, then looked at Madison with eyes that had seen everything twice. You've had an interesting 24 hours. That's one word for it. Let's start with Marcus Webb. According to Dr. Brennan's surgical report, his injuries were consistent with a targeted assassination attempt using armor-piercing rounds. He should be dead. The fact that he's not is directly attributable to your intervention. Is that accurate? I provided emergency medical care. Dr. Brennan performed the surgery. Don't be modest, Lieutenant. It doesn't suit you. Vasquez closed the folder. Webb is a federal prosecutor investigating organized crime connections to medical fraud. Someone wanted him dead. They almost succeeded. And then you happened to be in exactly the right place with exactly the right skills. Madison said nothing. Which brings me to my question, Vasquez continued. What were you doing at Riverside General when you'd been suspended 3 hours earlier? I got a call from Captain Barnes warning me about the convoy. I went back to help. Despite being ordered to leave? People were going to die. And that matters more than following orders? Madison met Vasquez's eyes. Yes, ma'am. It does. Vasquez smiled, thin, knowing. Good answer. Because we have a problem, Lieutenant. The people who tried to kill Webb are still out there. And now they know he survived, which means they might try again. which means we need people we can trust protecting him while he recovers. I'm not a bodyguard. No. You're a combat medic with trauma certification and a security clearance that's still active. Vasquez leaned forward. We're placing protective detail on Webb during his recovery. We need a medical professional embedded with that detail, someone who can handle emergencies without requiring external support, someone who won't panic if things go bad. Madison's stomach dropped. You want me to go back to Riverside? We want you on Webb's recovery team, whether that's at Riverside or wherever else he needs to be transferred. Vasquez paused. This is voluntary, but it would help us considerably. I'm suspended. Not anymore. Vasquez pulled out another document. I spoke with Riverside's administration this morning. Your suspension has been lifted pending completion of the internal review. You're cleared to return to duty immediately. Madison stared at the paper. How did you... The Justice Department can be very persuasive when national security is involved. Vasquez's expression didn't change. But understand what you're agreeing to. If you accept this assignment, you're putting yourself in potential danger. The people who targeted Webb are well-funded, well-connected, and extremely motivated. Being associated with his care makes you a person of interest. Are you saying they might come after me? I'm saying it's possible. We'll provide protection, but the risk exists. Madison thought about Webb lying in recovery, about the people who'd put bullets in him, about the fact that somewhere out there, someone was planning their next move. Then she thought about Dr. Kern's face when the colonel had saluted her, about Patricia's discomfort, about the suspension that had just disappeared because suddenly she was useful. If I do this, Madison said slowly, I want something in return. Vasquez raised an eyebrow. Go on. Full review of Dr. Kern's decisions during the mass casualty event. Independent evaluation. Whatever your investigation finds, it goes on the record. That's already happening. Then I want protection for the staff who supported me. Nurses like Amy, who followed my lead instead of Kern's orders. They took risks. I want to make sure they're not punished for it. Vasquez glanced at Davidson, then back at Madison. Done. Anything else? Madison hesitated, then said, When this is over, I want a recommendation letter. From you. For whatever comes next. Planning to leave Riverside? I don't think Riverside's going to want me after this. Vasquez smiled. You might be surprised, Lieutenant, but yes, you help us keep Webb alive, you get my recommendation. Deal? Madison took a breath, let it out. Deal. They spent the next hour going over logistics, Webb's condition, security protocols, communication channels, the investigation's current status. By the time Madison left Federal Plaza, her head was spinning with information, and her phone had 6 new messages from Riverside administrators asking when she was returning to work. She called Patricia from the parking lot. Ms. Cole. Patricia sounded tense. I assume you've spoken with the federal agents? I have. They told me my suspension was lifted. Yes. Under circumstances I'm still trying to fully understand. Patricia paused. When can you return? Tomorrow. I need to handle some administrative details first. Understood. When you arrive, come directly to my office. We need to discuss your assignment. Madison hung up and sat in her car, watching traffic flow past on the street outside. 24 hours ago, she'd been thrown out of Riverside. Now she was being pulled back in by forces she barely understood, assigned to protect a man she didn't know, and caught in the middle of something that felt bigger than hospital politics. Her phone buzzed again. Text message. Unknown number. Stay away from Webb. This is your only warning. Madison stared at the screen until it went dark. Then she started her car and drove toward Riverside, because apparently warnings didn't work on her anymore. Madison deleted the text without responding and kept driving. Threats were nothing new. She'd received them before, in dust-choked outposts where enemy combatants left notes on corpses, in field hospitals where insurgents promised retribution for treating coalition soldiers. Words on a screen didn't scare her. What scared her was the implication that whoever sent it knew her number, knew her involvement with Webb, and knew enough to think a warning would work. She forwarded the message to Agent Reeves before pulling into Riverside's parking lot. The hospital looked different in daylight after chaos. Cleaner, calmer. The news vans had multiplied overnight. At least a dozen now, reporters doing stand-ups in front of the emergency entrance, trying to piece together yesterday's story from fragments and speculation. Madison parked in the employee lot and entered through a side door that required badge access, except her badge was still sitting on Patricia's desk, confiscated during her suspension. She was reaching for her phone to call when the door opened from inside. Amy stood there, holding it open. "Figured you'd need this." Madison slipped through. "Thanks. How'd you know I'd come this way?" "Because the front entrance is a circus, and you don't strike me as someone who likes cameras." Amy fell into step beside her. "Fair warning, it's tense up there. Kern's been in meetings all morning. Patricia looks like she's aged 10 years, and half the staff thinks you're a hero, while the other half thinks you're going to get everyone sued." "Which half are you?" Amy smiled tiredly. "The half that's still alive because you knew what you were doing." They reached administration. Patricia's door was closed, voices audible through the wood. Madison knocked anyway. "Come in." The office was crowded. Patricia behind her desk, looking exhausted. Dr. Kern in one of the guest chairs, radiating barely contained fury. And standing near the window, a man Madison didn't recognize, late 50s, expensive suit, the kind of posture that suggested corporate authority. Patricia stood. "Miss Cole, thank you for coming. This is Harold Westbrook, Riverside's chief operating officer." Westbrook turned, assessed Madison in a single glance that cataloged everything from her off-the-rack jacket to her military bearing. "Ms. Cole, we have a complicated situation." Madison remained standing. "So I've heard. The Justice Department has requested your assignment to a federal protective detail," Westbrook continued. "They've also made it clear that your suspension has been lifted and that Riverside is expected to cooperate fully with their investigation. However, Dr. Kern has raised legitimate concerns about protocol violations and chain of command issues that occurred during yesterday's emergency." Kern's jaw tightened. Legitimate concerns? She committed gross insubordination, practiced outside her scope, and endangered. "She saved lives," Patricia interrupted quietly, "including a federal prosecutor whose death would have brought national scrutiny to this facility. That doesn't excuse—" "Dr. Kern," Westbrook's voice carried the weight of final authority. "I've reviewed the incident reports, the surgical records, and witness statements from 17 staff members. I've also spoken with Dr. Brennan, Colonel Davidson, and Deputy Director Vasquez. The consensus is clear. Ms. Cole's actions, while unorthodox, were medically sound and directly prevented multiple fatalities." Kern's face went red. "So we're just ignoring hospital policy?" "We're acknowledging that extraordinary circumstances sometimes require extraordinary responses." Westbrook turned back to Madison. "However, that doesn't mean there won't be consequences. Your personnel file will reflect a formal reprimand for failure to follow chain of command. You'll also be required to complete additional training on hospital protocols before resuming normal duties." Madison kept her expression neutral. "Understood. In the meantime, you're being temporarily reassigned to provide medical oversight for Marcus Webb's recovery under federal protection. This assignment supersedes normal hospital scheduling and places you under Justice Department authority. Any questions?" "How long?" "Until Webb is medically cleared or the security threat is resolved." Westbrook paused. "I should mention that this arrangement is highly unusual. Riverside doesn't typically loan staff to federal agencies. But given the circumstances and the pressure being applied, we don't have much choice." Kern stood abruptly. "This is absurd. You're rewarding insubordination and setting a precedent that will undermine every attending physician in this hospital. I'm protecting this institution from a federal investigation that could destroy us," Westbrook said coldly. "Your ego is not my priority, Richard. Patient outcomes are, and yesterday's outcomes speak for themselves." "Then maybe you need a new chief of emergency medicine." The room went silent. Westbrook studied Kern with the expression of someone doing complex mathematics. "If that's your resignation, I'll accept it. If it's a threat, I'll ignore it. Choose carefully." Kern's mouth opened, closed. His eyes swept the room, Patricia, Madison, Westbrook, and found no support anywhere. "I need to speak with my attorney," he said finally. "That's your right. In the meantime, you're on administrative leave pending the completion of the internal review. Dr. Brennan will assume temporary leadership of the ER." Kern's face went from red to white. "You can't." "I can. And I am." Westbrook's tone left no room for argument. "You're dismissed, Dr. Kern. Kern looked at Madison. Whatever he saw in her expression made him look away quickly. He left without another word, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Patricia exhaled slowly. That could have gone better. It could have gone worse, Westbrook said. Ms. Cole, you'll report to ICU Room 7. That's where Webb is being held under protective custody. Colonel Davidson's security team is already in place. They're expecting you. Madison nodded and left before anyone could add complications. The ICU was on the 4th floor, accessible only by elevator and badge-controlled doors. Madison borrowed a temporary badge from the nurses' station and made her way through the quiet, antiseptic hallways. ICU Room 7 was at the end of the corridor, flanked by 2 men in suits with the kind of alertness that suggested military backgrounds. One of them stepped forward. ID. Madison showed her temporary badge and driver's license. The agent checked both against a list on his tablet, then nodded. You're cleared. Colonel's inside. The room was larger than standard ICU accommodations, private, with space for monitoring equipment and a small desk where another agent sat watching camera feeds. Webb occupied the bed, intubated and sedated, connected to enough machines to keep a small electronics store in business. His vitals displayed on multiple monitors, heart rate steady at 78, blood pressure holding at 110/65, oxygen saturation at 97%. Colonel Davidson stood near the window, speaking quietly into his phone. He ended the call when Madison entered. Lieutenant, glad you made it. Sir, what's the situation? Webb's stable, but still critical. Dr. Brennan wants to keep him sedated for at least 48 hours to let the surgical repairs settle. After that, it's a question of infection risk and recovery trajectory. Davidson gestured to the monitors. You'll be conducting hourly assessments and coordinating with the ICU medical team. If anything changes, you notify me immediately. Clear? Clear. Has there been any additional threat activity? Not yet. But we're operating under the assumption that whoever targeted Webb knows he survived and will attempt to finish the job. Davidson pulled out his phone, showed Madison a photo. Recognize this vehicle? The image showed a black SUV, commercial plates, parked near the interstate junction where the mass casualty event occurred. No. Should I? Security footage from the incident shows this vehicle leaving the scene 90 seconds before first responders arrived. We think it was used for surveillance or coordination. The plates are registered to a shell company with ties to organized crime. Madison studied the photo. You think the mass casualty event was cover for the assassination attempt? We think someone saw an opportunity and took it, because a major accident used the chaos to hit Webb's convoy, disappear in the confusion. It almost worked. Except Webb survived. Because you were there. Davidson pocketed his phone. Which brings me to the threat you received this morning. Agent Reeves forwarded it. We're tracing the number, but it was likely a burner. Still, the fact that they contacted you directly is concerning. They're trying to isolate Webb, remove anyone who might protect him. That's our assessment, which is why you're not leaving this hospital without security escort. Agent Cortez will be your shadow for the duration of this assignment. Madison glanced at the agent by the monitors, young, Latino, built like someone who spent serious time in the gym. He nodded without smiling. Is that really necessary? Madison asked. You received a direct threat 12 hours after becoming involved in a federal case. Yes, it's necessary. Davidson's expression softened slightly. I know this isn't what you signed up for when you became a civilian, but you're in it now, and we need to keep you safe. I can handle myself. I don't doubt that. But humor me anyway. Madison spent the next hour familiarizing herself with Webb's medical status. Post-operative day 1, following extensive liver repair and thoracic exploration. Multiple drains in place, chest tube, surgical drains, Foley catheter. IV antibiotics running to prevent infection. Sedation maintained with propofol and fentanyl. Lab values showing improvement but still concerning. Hemoglobin at 8.2, requiring transfusion monitoring. She was checking the chest tube output when Dr. Brennan arrived, still wearing surgical scrubs from whatever procedure she'd just finished. How's he looking? Brennan asked. Stable? Drain output is decreasing, no signs of active bleeding. Brennan reviewed the monitors, made notes on her tablet. Good. I want to start weaning sedation tomorrow if his pressure holds. The longer he's under, the higher the pneumonia risk. Agreed, but Colonel Davidson wants him sedated for security reasons. Conscious patient means possible communication, which means potential information leaks. Brennan's expression hardened. My patient's medical needs come before security concerns. If keeping him sedated longer than necessary increases mortality risk, we wake him up. Davidson can deal with it. Madison appreciated the directness. I'll let him know. You do that. Brennan turned to leave, then stopped. By the way, Westbrook's announcement about Kern, did you have anything to do with that? No, I didn't even know it was happening. Well, the ER staff is celebrating like it's a holiday. Kern wasn't popular. She paused. You should know that your little performance yesterday has made you something of a legend around here. Half the nurses want to buy you drinks. The other half want your autograph. I just did my job. Keep telling yourself that. Brennan left before Madison could respond. The rest of the day passed in careful monotony. Hourly assessments, vital sign documentation, coordination with ICU nursing staff who treated Madison with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Agent Cortez remained a constant presence, positioned near the door, watching everything with professional paranoia. At 6 p.m., Madison's phone buzzed. Text from Amy. Break room. Now. You need to see this. Madison glanced at Cortez. I'm taking a break. He stood immediately. I'll come with you. It's the break room, and I'm your security detail. Let's go. They found Amy in the staff break room, staring at a wall-mounted television tuned to local news. On screen, Rebecca Torres stood outside Riverside General, microphone in hand, expression serious. Exclusive investigation has uncovered disturbing allegations about the emergency response at Riverside General Hospital during yesterday's mass casualty event. Sources close to the situation claim that Dr. Richard Kern, the hospital's chief of emergency medicine, ignored critical warnings from a staff nurse, later identified as Madison Cole, a decorated military veteran, resulting in delayed treatment and potentially preventable complications. The screen cut to footage of the ER entrance, then back to Torres. Hospital administration has placed Dr. Kern on administrative leave pending investigation, but questions remain about why a combat-trained medical professional was working in relative obscurity and why her expertise was initially dismissed. We reached out to Riverside General for comment, but representatives declined to speak on camera. This is Rebecca Torres, Channel 7 News. Amy muted the television. It's been running all afternoon. Every station's picked it up. You're famous. Madison's stomach sank. That's not good. Why not? You're the hero here. Because heroes make targets. Madison turned to Cortez. We need to get back to Webb's room. Now. They moved quickly through the hallways. Madison's instincts were screaming, the kind of warning that had kept her alive in combat zones where threats didn't announce themselves. Public exposure meant visibility. Visibility meant vulnerability. And somewhere out there, people who wanted Webb dead were watching the same news coverage. They were 20 feet from ICU room 7 when the lights went out. Emergency backup power kicked in immediately, bathing the corridor in dim red light. But that 2-second gap, that moment of complete darkness, was enough for Madison's training to take over. She grabbed Cortez's arm. Get to Webb's room, now! Cortez was already moving, weapon drawn, radio active. All units, power failure on floor 4. Repeat, power failure. Webb's location potentially compromised. The door to room 7 was closed. Cortez approached tactically, checking angles, then keyed his radio. Room 7, status. Static. Room 7, respond. Nothing. Cortez looked at Madison. Stay behind me. He opened the door fast, weapon raised, clearing the space in seconds. The agent who'd been monitoring cameras was slumped over the desk, blood pooling beneath him. The second agent lay near Webb's bed, throat cut, still gurgling. Webb was gone. The bed was empty except for disconnected monitoring leads and IV lines that dripped onto blood-soaked sheets. Someone had intubated him just long enough to move him without immediately killing him. Cortez swore, already talking into his radio. Code red, code red. Webb is missing. ICU floor 4. Agents down. Initiate lockdown protocols. Alarms started screaming throughout the hospital. Madison knelt beside the dying agent, checked his pulse. Thready, fading. The neck wound was catastrophic, severing the carotid. She pressed her hands against it anyway, applying pressure that wouldn't matter because he'd lost too much blood already. His eyes found hers, tried to speak. Don't, Madison said. Just hold on. He died 30 seconds later. Cortez was coordinating response teams, sealing exits, checking security footage. Madison stood, hands covered in blood that wasn't hers, staring at the empty bed where a federal prosecutor had been 2 minutes ago. They took him during the power failure, she said. 2-minute window. Maybe less. Cortez's face was stone. They had inside help. Had to. Someone who knew the floor layout, the security rotation, how to bypass the backup generators long enough to create darkness. Madison thought about the text message. The warning. Stay away from Webb. They'd known she'd be here, known she'd be assigned to his protection, and they'd planned around it anyway. Colonel Davidson arrived with 6 more agents, weapons drawn, faces grim. He took one look at the scene and his expression went cold. Report. Cortez gave it fast and efficient. 2 agents killed. Webb extracted during power failure. No witnesses, no immediate suspects. Davidson turned to Madison. You were conducting hourly assessments. When was your last check? 45 minutes ago. He was stable, sedated. No visitors except medical staff. Who had access to this room? ICU nurses? Dr. Brennan? Respiratory therapy? Maybe a dozen people total. Davidson pulled out his phone, started making calls. Within minutes, hospital security was pulling footage, locking down exits, checking employee logs. But Madison knew they were too late. Whoever had taken Webb had planned this precisely. They'd known exactly when to strike, exactly how long they'd have, exactly how to disappear. The hospital descended into controlled chaos. Federal agents everywhere. Local police called in. Staff being interviewed. Patients relocated. The news vans outside multiplied as word spread that something major was happening. Madison was escorted to a secure conference room where Agent Reeves and Deputy Director Vasquez were already waiting. Vasquez looked like she'd aged 5 years since this morning. Walk me through it, Vasquez said. Everything from the moment you arrived until we found the room empty. Madison recounted it precisely. The assignment, the assessments, the news coverage, the power failure, the bodies, the empty bed. Vasquez listened without interrupting. When Madison finished, she said, The news coverage wasn't an accident. Someone leaked your identity to the media deliberately. They wanted Webb's protection detail to know you were involved. Why? Because you're predictable. Combat medic sees a patient in danger. You don't walk away. You stay close. You maintain vigilance. Vasquez's expression was grim. They used that against us. Got you focused on Webb while they positioned their real play. The power failure. Hospital maintenance logs show a scheduled electrical test was entered into the system 3 hours ago. Except maintenance never authorized it. Someone with administrative access created a false work order, then used it to justify cutting power to the ICU floor. Madison felt cold. Inside help. Hospital employee, maybe more than one. We're checking everyone who had access to the relevant systems. Vasquez paused. The question is whether Webb is already dead or if they took him alive for interrogation. He was sedated and intubated. They'd need medical expertise to keep him stable during transport. Which means they have a medic on their team, someone with training. Madison thought about that. About what kind of organization could plan this precisely, execute it this cleanly, and have the resources to include medical support. This isn't just organized crime. No, Vasquez agreed. It's not. She pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. Inside were surveillance photos, men in suits, conducting meetings, exchanging documents. One face stood out, older, distinguished, familiar in a way that made Madison's stomach drop. Harold Westbrook, Riverside's chief operating officer. Westbrook? Madison stared at the photo. He's the one who lifted my suspension, who put Kern on leave. He also has financial ties to 3 shell corporations linked to medical fraud investigations, Vasquez said. Webb was building a case against a network that's been billing Medicare and Medicaid for millions in fraudulent procedures. Westbrook's been under surveillance for 6 months. Then why didn't you arrest him? Because we needed evidence. Webb was close to securing testimony from a cooperating witness, someone inside the network willing to flip. But before he could finalize it, the assassination attempt happened. Vasquez's jaw tightened. We think Westbrook was trying to eliminate Webb before the case could proceed. When that failed, he shifted to extraction and interrogation. If Webb talks, Westbrook needs to know what he knows and who else knows it. Madison processed this. So everything today, lifting my suspension, assigning me to Webb's protection, was theater. Westbrook needed you visible and traceable so his people could plan around you. The news coverage, the staff interviews, all of it fed intelligence about our security protocols and Webb's location. Vasquez closed the folder. You were never protecting Webb. You were bait to keep our attention divided while they set up the extraction. The words hit like a punch. Madison had spent the entire day thinking she was doing something useful, something important. Instead, she'd been a distraction, a piece on a board she hadn't known existed. Where is he now? Madison asked quietly. We don't know, but we're working on it. The conference room door opened. Colonel Davidson entered, expression dark. We've got something. Traffic camera caught a medical transport van leaving Riverside's loading dock 6 minutes after the power failure. Plates are registered to a private ambulance company that doesn't exist. We're tracking it now. Vasquez stood. Where was it headed? North on Highway 12 toward the industrial district. We lost it near the old Hastings Medical Complex. Madison's head snapped up. Hastings Medical? Former hospital. Closed 3 years ago. Why? Because that's where someone would go if they needed medical facilities outside normal oversight. Madison was already moving toward the door. Operating rooms, imaging equipment, pharmacy supplies. If they're interrogating Webb medically, using drugs, monitoring vitals during questioning, they'd need infrastructure. Davidson pulled out his phone. I'm calling tactical teams. No. Vasquez's voice cut through the room. If we roll in with tactical, they'll kill Webb the second they see us. We need reconnaissance first. Eyes on the location before we commit. She turned to Madison. Can you identify medical equipment from external observation? Depends on the setup, but yes. Then you're coming with us. Vasquez headed for the door. Davidson, get me a tactical team staged 2 blocks out. Silent approach. No lights, no sirens. Cole and I go in first to confirm Webb's location and status. Davidson looked like he wanted to argue, but Vasquez's expression left no room. Yes, ma'am. They moved fast. Madison, Vasquez, Cortez, and 4 additional agents in 2 unmarked vehicles. The drive to Hastings Medical took 17 minutes through evening traffic that felt like it was deliberately slowing them down. The complex loomed ahead, 6 stories of abandoned architecture, windows dark, surrounded by chain-link fence and no trespassing signs. The kind of place urban explorers loved and police ignored unless forced to care. Vasquez's vehicle stopped 2 blocks away. Thermal imaging shows heat signatures on the 3rd floor northwest corner, consistent with active electrical equipment and multiple people. Could be Webb, could be squatters. We don't know until we get closer. Madison studied the building through binoculars. Service entrance on the east side looks accessible. If we can get to the stairwell, we can approach the 3rd floor from below. You've done this before. Cleared buildings in Kandahar. Different contexts, same principles. Vasquez handed her a radio and a tactical vest. Stay behind Cortez. If shooting starts, you hit the ground. Clear? Clear. They moved in darkness, using the fence line for cover. The service entrance was exactly where Madison remembered from the photos. Metal door, rusted hinges, lock that looked secure but yielded to Cortez's picks in under a minute. Inside, the building smelled like decay and abandonment, water damage, mold, the specific emptiness of places people stopped caring about. They climbed stairs carefully, weapons drawn, moving with the kind of silence that came from training and necessity. 3rd floor, northwest corner. Voices audible through a closed door, muffled, indistinct. The glow of electric light visible beneath the frame. Cortez signaled. Madison and Vasquez held position while he and another agent approached the door, checked the frame, confirmed it was unlocked. Then they went through fast. The room beyond had been converted into a makeshift medical facility. Surgical lights, monitoring equipment, IV stands, and in the center, strapped to a gurney, was Marcus Webb. He was conscious now, awake and terrified, eyes wide above the tape covering his mouth. 2 men stood over him, one in scrubs, one in a business suit. The man in scrubs held a syringe. "Federal agents," Cortez shouted. "Drop the weapon and step back." The man in scrubs didn't drop the syringe. Instead, he jammed it into Webb's IV line and pushed the plunger. Webb's body convulsed. Madison didn't think. She just moved, crossing the room in 3 strides, ripping the IV line out of Webb's arm before whatever was in that syringe could finish entering his system. The man in scrubs tried to grab her. Cortez put 2 rounds in his chest. The man in the suit ran for a side door. Another agent tackled him before he made it 3 steps. Madison focused on Webb. His vitals were crashing, heart rate spiking into the 160s, blood pressure dropping, respiratory distress visible even through the sedation. She checked his pupils, fixed and dilated. "What did you give him?" she demanded, turning to the man in scrubs who was dying on the floor. He smiled through blood-stained teeth. "Enough." Then he stopped breathing. Madison turned back to Webb, mind racing through options. Unknown drug, unknown dosage, symptoms consistent with cardiac arrest or severe arrhythmia. She needed to reverse it, but she didn't know what it was. "Naloxone," she said. "Someone find me naloxone. Now." Vasquez was already searching the equipment tables. She found a vial, tossed it to Madison. Madison drew it up, pushed it IV. Waited. Webb's vitals didn't change. "Not opioid-based," Madison said. "Try flumazanil, benzodiazepine reversal." Another vial. Another injection. Still nothing. Webb's heart rate hit 180. His lips were turning blue. Madison looked at the monitors, at the equipment, at the dying man on the floor who'd known exactly what he was doing. Then she saw it. On the equipment table, a medication vial, half empty, label partially visible. Potassium chloride. "No," Madison whispered. Hyperkalemia. Massive dose delivered directly into the bloodstream. It would cause cardiac arrest within minutes, and there was no fast reversal, just supportive care and time they didn't have. She started chest compressions anyway, because that's what you did when someone was dying and giving up wasn't an option. "Get me calcium gluconate," she shouted. "And call for medical evac. We need a hospital, now." Vasquez was already on her phone calling it in. Cortez grabbed the calcium gluconate, handed it over. Madison pushed it through a clean IV line she'd placed in Webb's other arm, then resumed compressions. 100 beats per minute, 2 inches deep. Don't stop. Don't think about the fact that his heart was flooded with potassium and every second made it worse. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Webb's monitor showed ventricular fibrillation, lethal rhythm. "Defib!" Madison looked around frantically. "Where's the defib?" Cortez found one, powered it up, handed her the paddles. Madison charged them. "Clear!" She shocked Webb's chest. His body arched. The monitor showed the same deadly rhythm. "Charging again! Clear!" Another shock. Another failure. Madison went back to compressions, sweat pouring down her face, arms burning, knowing that every second decreased his chances, and there was nothing she could do except keep trying. The medical evac team burst through the door 4 minutes later. They took over with practiced efficiency, continuing care, loading Webb onto their stretcher, moving toward the helicopter that had landed in the parking lot outside. Madison followed them out, hands still shaking from adrenaline, watching them lift off into the night sky with Webb's fate uncertain. Vasquez appeared beside her. "You did everything you could." Madison didn't answer, because everything wasn't enough. She'd been too slow, too late, too focused on the wrong threats while the real danger happened right in front of her. And now Webb might die anyway. Back at Riverside, the hospital had transformed into a federal crime scene. Agents everywhere. Westbrook in custody, being escorted out in handcuffs while cameras rolled and reporters shouted questions. Patricia in her office, staring at nothing, trying to process how her COO had been running a criminal enterprise under her nose. Madison sat in an empty conference room, still wearing the tactical vest, still covered in Webb's blood, waiting for news that wouldn't come for hours. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "You should have listened to the warning. Now more people will die, and you'll be the one who has to watch." Madison stared at the message until the screen went black. Then someone knocked on the conference room door and everything changed again. Agent Reeves entered the conference room carrying a laptop and an expression that suggested bad news dressed as progress. "Webb's alive," he said before Madison could ask. "Barely. They've got him in cardiac ICU at Metro General. His potassium levels were off the charts, 7.8 when they landed. Normal's 3.5 to 5. Another 2 minutes and his heart would have stopped permanently. Madison exhaled slowly. Prognosis? Touch and go. They're running continuous dialysis to clear the potassium, but there's concern about cardiac damage and neurological effects from the arrest. Won't know the full extent for at least 48 hours. Reeves set the laptop on the table. But he's talking, sort of, enough to give us names. He opened the laptop, turned it toward Madison. The screen showed an interrogation room. Westbrook sitting across from Vasquez and another agent, lawyer present, looking significantly less composed than he had 6 hours ago. This is from an hour ago, Reeves said. Watch. Vasquez's voice came through the speakers. Mr. Westbrook, we have security footage showing you entering the hospital maintenance office at 4:15 p.m., approximately 90 minutes before the power failure that facilitated Webb's extraction. Care to explain that? Westbrook's lawyer leaned forward. My client was conducting routine administrative oversight. Your client accessed electrical systems he had no authorization to touch, Vasquez interrupted. And 30 minutes later, someone using administrative credentials created a false work order that shut down power to the ICU floor. Those credentials trace back to an account registered in your client's name. Westbrook's face remained carefully neutral. I have no knowledge of any false work orders. Really? Because the system logs show your specific login token, your password, your security clearance. Vasquez slid a document across the table. We also have financial records connecting you to 3 shell corporations that have been billing federal healthcare programs for fraudulent procedures. Webb was investigating those corporations. Now he's fighting for his life after being extracted from your hospital by people working for those same organizations. You're going to sit there and claim coincidence? Miss. The lawyer started to speak. Westbrook put a hand on his arm. I want immunity, Westbrook said. You want what? Full immunity in exchange for testimony. I'll give you names, locations, the entire network, but I walk. Vasquez stared at him. You facilitated the attempted murder of a federal prosecutor. You think we're negotiating? I think you need what I know more than you need to punish me. The people running this operation, I'm small. I'm a middle manager who helped coordinate logistics. But the real players, the ones moving serious money and making decisions about who lives and dies, I can give them to you, all of them, but only if I'm protected. The video paused. Reeves closed the laptop. He's been talking for 3 hours. Names, addresses, bank accounts. The entire medical fraud network, including ties to organized crime families in 3 states. Vasquez thinks we can dismantle the whole operation using his testimony. Madison felt cold. So he gets immunity? Just walks away? Reduced charges. Witness protection. A deal that makes my stomach turn but might actually save lives by preventing future attacks. Reeves sat down across from Madison. The question is whether you can live with that. Does it matter what I can live with? Actually, yes, because Westbrook implicated someone else. Someone you know. Madison's jaw tightened. Who? Dr. Richard Kern. The room went silent. Reeves continued. According to Westbrook, Kern wasn't just an egotistical attending physician. He was on the payroll. The fraud network needed someone inside Riverside's ER who could manipulate patient records, approve unnecessary procedures, and keep federal auditors from looking too closely at billing irregularities. Kern provided that service for 18 months in exchange for monthly payments totaling over $200,000. Madison thought about Kern's face when she'd taken control of the trauma bay. The rage. The humiliation. She'd assumed it was just ego. Turned out it was also fear. Fear that someone competent would notice patterns he'd been hiding. He knew Webb was coming, Madison said slowly. That's why he tried to push me out. He needed me gone before federal scrutiny increased. Exactly. Your suspension wasn't about insubordination, it was about elimination. If you weren't around to notice irregularities during the emergency, Westbrook's people would have better opportunity to extract Webb without interference. Reeves paused. Kern's in custody now, picked up an hour ago at his home. He's not talking yet, but the financial evidence is solid. Good. There's more. Reeves pulled out his phone, showed Madison a photo. Recognize him? The image showed the man in scrubs from Hastings Medical, the one who'd injected Webb with potassium chloride before Cortez shot him. Madison nodded. He's the one who tried to kill Webb. His name was David Marsh, former Army medic. Served 2 tours, received medical discharge for psychological issues. Fell into contract work for criminal organizations that needed medical expertise without oversight. Reeves swiped to another photo. And this is interesting. Marsh and Kern knew each other. They served in the same unit overseas. That's how Westbrook recruited Kern in the first place. Old military connections being exploited for profit. Madison stared at the photos. 2 veterans using their training to hurt people instead of help them. It made her sick. There's one more thing, Reeves said quietly. The text messages you've been receiving, we traced them. They came from a burner phone, but cell tower data puts that phone inside Riverside General during the times the messages were sent. Whoever's threatening you has access to this hospital. Westbrook and Kern are both in custody, which means there's at least one more person involved that we haven't identified yet. Reeves met her eyes. Someone who's still free, still watching, still dangerous. Madison's phone buzzed before she could respond. Another text from the unknown number. Kern was weak. Westbrook was greedy. But I'm neither. You cost me millions and killed a valuable asset. That has consequences. Watch your back, Lieutenant. She showed the message to Reeves. His expression darkened. We need to get you somewhere secure. No. Madison stood. I'm not hiding. Whoever this is wants me scared and isolated. I'm not giving them that. Madison, they're trying to finish what they started. Remove anyone who can identify them or testify against them. But I'm not running. She grabbed her jacket. I'm going back to work. Reeves looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he said, Then you're doing it with full security detail, non-negotiable. 20 minutes later, Madison was back in Riverside's ER, escorted by 2 federal agents who looked deeply unhappy about the assignment. The department had changed in the 36 hours since the mass casualty event. Quieter, more organized. Dr. Brennan had taken over as interim chief and apparently run the place with efficiency that made Kern's tenure look incompetent by comparison. Amy found Madison near the nurses' station. You're back. I wasn't sure you would be. Neither was I. For what it's worth, everyone's talking about what you did, saving Webb, taking down Westbrook. You're basically a legend now. Madison didn't feel legendary. She felt exhausted and angry and tired of being used as a chess piece in games she didn't understand. How's the department running without Kern? She asked. Amy's smile was genuine. Better. So much better. Brennan actually listens when we raise concerns. She doesn't yell, doesn't throw instruments. It's like working in a completely different hospital. Good. There's a staff meeting in 20 minutes. Brennan wants everyone there. She's announcing changes. The meeting was held in the main conference room, packed with ER staff who looked nervous and hopeful in equal measure. Dr. Brennan stood at the front, wearing scrubs and an expression that suggested she'd rather be in surgery but recognized the necessity of this conversation. I'll keep this brief, Brennan began. As you all know, Dr. Kern has been placed on indefinite administrative leave pending criminal investigation. Harold Westbrook has been arrested on federal charges. The hospital board has asked me to assume permanent leadership of the emergency department, and I've accepted that position. Scattered applause. Brennan waited for it to die down. Here's what's changing immediately. First, we're implementing new protocols for escalation of care. If any nurse or staff member identifies a medical concern, that concern will be addressed by the attending physician without question or retaliation. Second, we're establishing anonymous reporting channels for anyone who observes conduct that compromises patient safety. Third, I'm personally reviewing every unusual billing pattern from the last 2 years to identify any remaining fraud that Kern may have facilitated. She paused, looked directly at Madison. And fourth, I'm creating a new position, Emergency Medicine Clinical Liaison. Someone with advanced training who can coordinate between nursing staff and physicians during critical incidents. Someone who understands both emergency protocols and tactical medical response. Brennan's expression softened slightly. Madison Cole, if you're interested, I'd like to offer you that position. The room went silent. Madison stood slowly. Dr. Brennan, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure. You're not sure you're qualified, Brennan interrupted. You coordinated a mass casualty response that saved at least a dozen lives. You provided surgical assistance that kept a federal prosecutor alive long enough to reach the OR. And you did it while being actively undermined by your supervisor. I'd say you're more than qualified. It's not about qualifications. It's about whether I fit here. You fit better than anyone I've seen in 10 years. Brennan crossed her arms. Look, I'm not going to beg, but this department needs people who know what they're doing and aren't afraid to act when seconds matter. You proved you're that person, so the question isn't whether you fit. The question is whether you want to. Madison looked around the room. At Amy, who was smiling. At Janet, who nodded encouragement. At the staff who'd followed her orders during the chaos and lived to talk about it. Can I think about it? You have 24 hours. After that, I'm offering it to someone else. The meeting ended. Staff dispersed. Madison was heading toward the exit when Patricia appeared, looking older and more tired than Madison had ever seen her. Miss Cole, can we talk? They walked to Patricia's office in silence. Inside, the motivational posters looked absurd now, cheerful platitudes about teamwork and excellence in a place where the COO had been running a criminal enterprise. Patricia sat behind her desk like it might collapse under her. I owe you an apology. Madison waited. I believed Kern when he said you were dangerous. I trusted Westbrook when he told me your suspension was necessary. I let my concern about liability override my judgment about what actually happened in that trauma bay. Patricia's voice cracked slightly. And because of that, I almost destroyed someone who was trying to help. You were doing your job. My job is to support staff who save lives, not punish them for making doctors uncomfortable. Patricia pulled out a folder, slid it across the desk. This is the formal reprimand Westbrook insisted on placing in your file. I'm removing it. Your record will reflect commendation for exceptional performance under crisis conditions. It's not enough, but it's something. Madison opened the folder. Inside was a letter on hospital letterhead, signed by Patricia and the board chair, praising her conduct and recommending her for advancement. Thank you, Madison said quietly. Don't thank me. I should have done this 2 days ago. Patricia closed her eyes briefly. I've been working in hospital administration for 23 years. I thought I understood how to protect this institution, but I was protecting the wrong things, protecting egos instead of patients, protecting reputation instead of truth. And it took a federal investigation to show me how badly I'd failed. You weren't the one defrauding Medicare. No. But I created an environment where people like Kern and Westbrook could operate without challenge, where speaking up meant retaliation and keeping quiet meant safety. That's on me. Patricia stood. I've submitted my resignation to the board. It'll be effective in 30 days. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. This hospital needs leadership that won't make the same mistakes. Someone who'll listen to people like you instead of dismissing them. She managed a tired smile. For what it's worth, I hope you take Brennan's offer. You belong here more than I ever did. Madison left the office feeling like the world had tilted sideways. 24 hours ago, she'd been suspended and powerless. Now she was being offered promotions and apologies from people who'd tried to destroy her. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like exhaustion wearing a disguise. She was walking through the parking lot toward her car when her phone rang. Colonel Davidson. Lieutenant, we need to talk. Are you somewhere secure? Define secure. Not the hospital. Can you meet me at Federal Plaza in 30 minutes? What's this about? Webb's awake, and he's asking for you. Metro General's cardiac ICU was smaller than Riverside's, more cramped, with the kind of institutional efficiency that suggested they dealt with critical cases regularly and had stopped pretending it was anything other than life or death. Webb occupied a corner room, still connected to more machines than seemed reasonable, but conscious and breathing on his own. His eyes tracked Madison when she entered, recognition flickering despite the obvious exhaustion. Lieutenant Cole, he managed, voice rough from intubation. Mr. Webb, how are you feeling? Like someone tried to kill me twice and almost succeeded. He attempted a smile, failed. They tell me you're the reason I'm not dead. I did what I could, which was considerably more than most people would have managed. Webb shifted carefully, wincing. I wanted to thank you and apologize. For what? For getting you involved in this. Vasquez told me they used you as bait, used your involvement to distract from the real threat. That wasn't supposed to happen. Madison pulled a chair over, sat down. None of this was supposed to happen. No, but it did. And now Westbrook's talking, Kern's in custody, and the entire network I've been investigating for 8 months is falling apart. Webb's expression hardened. But there's still one person we haven't found. The one who coordinated everything. The one who sent those text messages. The one who's still threatening me. Yeah, that one. Webb met her eyes. Vasquez thinks it's someone with deep connections to both the medical fraud network and military contract circles. Someone who knew about my investigation, knew about your background, and had resources to plan the extraction and assassination attempts. Any suspects? 3 possibles, all with military backgrounds, all connected to medical supply companies that service hospitals in this region. Webb paused. One of them is former Special Forces, discharged under circumstances that were never fully explained. Another is a logistics coordinator who's been flagged by DoD for suspicious procurement patterns. The third is a hospital consultant who advises on efficiency and cost reduction, basically a professional who knows how to hide fraud inside legitimate operations. And you think one of them is behind this? I think all 3 are involved, but only one is giving the orders. Webb's breathing got heavier. The problem is we don't have enough evidence to move on any of them without tipping our hand. We need something concrete, something that connects them directly to the attacks. Madison thought about the text messages, the precision of the extraction, the inside knowledge required to pull it off. What if we give them an opportunity? She said slowly. Webb frowned. What do you mean? They want me dead because I'm a witness, because I can identify people and testify to what happened. So let's make them think they have a chance to finish the job. You want to use yourself as bait again? Not bait. A trap. Madison leaned forward. They think I'm isolated and vulnerable. Let's confirm that. Put out information that I'm being transferred to a secure location for protection. Create a window where they think they can hit me during transport. That's insane. That's tactical. They're hunting me anyway. This way we control the terrain. Webb studied her with the expression of someone reevaluating his assumptions. You've done this before. Convoy security in hostile territory. Different context, same principle. You can't avoid an ambush, but you can prepare for one. And if something goes wrong, then I handle it, same as always. Webb was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I'll talk to Vasquez. But Cole, if we do this, you follow protocol. No heroics, no improvisation. You do exactly what the security team tells you. Understood. She left Metro General and drove back to Riverside, mind already planning logistics. If they were going to set a trap, it needed to be convincing. Real enough that whoever was hunting her would commit resources, vulnerable enough that they'd take the shot, but controlled enough that she'd survive it. Her phone buzzed as she pulled into Riverside's parking lot. Another message from the unknown number. Enjoy your last few days, Lieutenant. I'm coming for you. And this time there won't be anyone to save you. Madison smiled grimly and forwarded the message to Vasquez. Then she went inside to finish her shift, because hiding had never been her style, and she wasn't starting now. The trap was set for 48 hours later. Vasquez leaked information through channels known to be compromised. Madison would be transferred to a federal safe house in rural Pennsylvania, transported by unmarked vehicle along a predetermined route. The transfer would happen at 0300 to minimize civilian exposure. What the leak didn't mention was the backup team staged along the route, the armed response units on standby, or the fact that Madison would be wearing body armor and carrying a weapon for the first time since leaving the military. She spent those 48 hours working normal shifts, acting like someone resigned to protection rather than someone planning an ambush. Dr. Brennan watched her carefully but didn't ask questions. Amy offered support without knowing what was coming. The federal agents shadowing her maintained professional distance. And every night, Madison received another threatening message, each one more specific, more detailed, more confident. Whoever was hunting her thought they'd already won. The night of the transfer, Madison met the security team at a location 3 blocks from Riverside, a parking garage where the unmarked SUV waited, engine running, agents checking equipment with practiced efficiency. Cortez handed her a vest. Ceramic plates, rated for rifle rounds. Wear it. She put it on without argument. Vasquez appeared from a second vehicle. Remember the protocol. You stay in the vehicle. You keep your head down. You let us handle any contact. Clear? Clear. Good. Because if this goes bad, I don't want to explain to Davidson why we got his combat medic killed. They loaded into the SUV, Madison in the back seat, Cortez driving, 2 more agents in support positions. The convoy pulled out at exactly 0300, headlights cutting through darkness, radio chatter quiet and controlled. The route took them through suburban streets, onto the highway, toward rural roads where ambush opportunities multiplied. Madison watched the surroundings, cataloging positions, calculating angles, falling back into tactical awareness she'd promised herself she was done with. They were 20 miles outside Ashford Heights when Cortez's radio crackled. Contact. 2 vehicles approaching fast from behind. Possible threat. Madison turned, saw headlights closing distance, moving with purpose. Evasive, Vasquez's voice came through the radio. All units, prepare for contact. Cortez accelerated. The pursuing vehicles matched speed. Then the night exploded with gunfire. Rounds punched through the rear window in a spray of safety glass that turned the interior into chaos. Madison hit the floor, body armor absorbing impacts she felt more than heard. Cortez swerved hard right, throwing her against the door while return fire erupted from the support vehicles. Stay down, Cortez shouted, but Madison was already moving, muscle memory overriding civilian instincts. She grabbed the rifle mounted under the seat, standard tactical loadout she'd noticed during prep, and checked the magazine. 30 rounds, full auto-capable. What are you doing? The agent beside her yelled. My job. Madison rolled down the window, brought the rifle up, and fired controlled bursts at the pursuing vehicle's engine block. The angle was terrible, the motion worse, but training meant you didn't need perfect conditions to hit center mass on a target. The lead pursuit vehicle's hood erupted in steam. It swerved, lost speed, fell back. The second vehicle accelerated into the gap. They're trying to box us in, Cortez's voice was tight. Backup units, where are you? 30 seconds out, Vasquez replied through static. Hold position. A rocket-propelled grenade streaked past the SUV's passenger side, missing by inches before detonating against a roadside barrier. The shockwave rocked the vehicle hard enough to lift the right side tires off pavement. RPE! Someone screamed unnecessarily. Madison's mind went ice-cold and tactical. RPG meant military hardware. Meant this wasn't just hired thugs with pistols. Meant whoever was hunting her had resources and training and zero concern about collateral damage. Get off the highway, she said. Now. Cortez didn't argue. He cut across 2 lanes, hit the off-ramp doing 70, and plunged into the industrial wasteland that bordered the highway. Abandoned warehouses, empty lots, the kind of terrain that offered cover and concealment if you knew how to use it. The pursuit vehicles followed. Madison keyed the radio. Vasquez, we're going mobile on foot. They've got anti-vehicle weapons and we're sitting ducks in here. Negative. You stay in the cage? That wasn't a request. Madison kicked open the door as Cortez brought the SUV to a sliding stop behind a concrete loading dock. Cortez, with me. Everyone else establish perimeter and wait for backup. She was out before anyone could countermand the order. The night smelled like oil and rust and old violence. Madison moved low and fast, Cortez right behind her, using the loading dock for cover while the pursuit vehicles skidded to a stop 50 yards away. Doors opened. Armed figures emerged. 4. No 5. Moving with coordinated precision that screamed military training. Madison took position behind a concrete pillar, sighted down the rifle, and waited. One of the attackers called out, Cole! We know you're here. Make this easy and nobody else dies. The voice was familiar. Madison couldn't place it, but something in the cadence triggered recognition. Who are you? She shouted back. Someone who knows exactly what you did in Kandahar. Someone who knows what you're worth, dead versus alive. A pause. Come out and we'll make it quick. Hide and we burn the whole site with you in it. Cortez looked at Madison. What's he talking about? No idea. But that was a lie. Kandahar meant her last deployment, meant the operation that had gone sideways and gotten 3 soldiers killed despite everything she'd done to save them. Meant someone knew details about her service that shouldn't be accessible to civilians. Movement. 2 attackers flanking left trying to circle the loading dock. Madison tracked them through her scope, waited until they crossed an open space, then fired. Double tap. Center mass. Both went down. The return fire was immediate and overwhelming. Automatic weapons tore through concrete, sent fragments spraying, forced Madison and Cortez to retreat deeper into the warehouse complex. "Backup's still 2 minutes out," Cortez said, checking his radio. "We need to hold—" An explosion cut him off. The support SUV erupted in flames, turning night into day for 3 seconds. The other agents scattered, returning fire, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Madison made a decision. "Fall back to the main road," she told Cortez. "Get the others out of the kill zone." "What about you?" "I'm ending this." She grabbed a flashbang from his tactical vest before he could stop her. "Go. That's an order." Cortez hesitated, then ran. Madison moved deeper into the warehouse, using the familiar weight of the rifle to center herself. This was what she'd been trained for, not hospital politics, not medical bureaucracy. This, violence applied with precision to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. She found a stairwell, climbed to the second floor, got the high ground. From here she could see the entire engagement zone. 3 attackers remaining, advancing carefully, communicating through hand signals. Professional, dangerous, and completely focused on the wrong target. Madison pulled the pin on the flashbang, counted to 2, and threw it into the center of their formation. The detonation was blinding even from 50 feet away. The attacker stumbled, disoriented, firing blindly. Madison didn't waste the opportunity. 3 shots, 3 targets, 2 went down permanently. The third took cover behind a concrete mixer, bleeding but functional. "Enough!" The familiar voice again coming from near the burning SUV. "I'm done playing." A figure stepped into the firelight. Male, late 40s, wearing tactical gear that looked expensive and well-maintained, and as he moved closer, Madison's breath caught. Dr. Marcus Holloway, the hospital consultant Webb had mentioned, the one who advised on efficiency and cost reduction. Except he wasn't holding a clipboard now. He was holding a custom AR-15 with optics that cost more than most cars. "Surprised," Holloway called up to her position. "You shouldn't be. I've been watching you since orientation day, Madison. Making sure you stayed manageable, stayed quiet, stayed invisible." Madison kept her rifle trained on him. "Why?" "Because Westbrook hired me to audit Riverside for vulnerabilities, places where we could skim money without attracting attention. And then you showed up, a combat medic with an eye for detail and a hero complex that made you dangerous." Holloway moved closer, circling, trying to get an angle. "I told Kern to get rid of you quietly, but he panicked, made it dramatic, and then everything spiraled. Webb was investigating you. Webb was getting too close to the entire operation, so we removed him, or tried to, but you just had to play hero again." His voice hardened. "Do you have any idea how much money you've cost me? How many connections you've destroyed? Westbrook's talking, Kern's talking. The whole network is collapsing because you couldn't stay in your lane." "Good." Holloway laughed, cold, bitter. "You think this is justice? It's not. It's just you being stubborn and lucky. But luck runs out, Lieutenant, and tonight yours just did." He raised his rifle. Madison fired first. The round caught Holloway in the shoulder, spinning him back, but he stayed on his feet. Return fire forced Madison to duck as rounds chewed through the metal railing she'd been using for cover. Then sirens screamed in the distance. Multiple vehicles, backup finally arriving. Holloway swore, grabbed his wounded shoulder, and ran for the remaining pursuit vehicle. His last operative provided covering fire while he climbed into the driver's seat. Madison had a clear shot. Could have ended it right there. Instead, she shot out both rear tires. The vehicle lurched forward anyway, Holloway driving on rims, sparks flying, desperate to escape. He made it maybe 300 yards before the engine seized and the whole thing ground to a smoking halt. Federal vehicles swarmed the area. Agents poured out, establishing perimeter, securing suspects. Vasquez emerged from the lead SUV, took one look at the carnage, and turned to Madison with an expression that mixed relief and exasperation. "You were supposed to stay in the vehicle. The vehicle got hit with an RPG. So you engaged 5 armed hostiles by yourself?" 4. Cortez helped with the 5th. Vasquez rubbed her temples. "You're going to give me an aneurysm." I kept my head down. Mostly. Agents dragged Holloway from the disabled vehicle, hands zip-tied, shoulder bleeding through his tactical vest. He looked at Madison with pure hatred. "This isn't over," he said. Madison walked up to him, close enough that Vasquez tensed. "Yeah, it is. You're going to prison. Westbrook's testifying against you. Kern's testifying against you. And I'm going to make sure every single person you hurt knows exactly who's responsible."
"You're nobody. Just a nurse who got lucky." "I'm the nurse who brought down your entire operation." Madison's voice dropped. "And I'm the last thing you're going to see before you spend the rest of your life in a cell. Remember that." Agents hauled Holloway away. He was still yelling threats when they shoved him into a transport vehicle. Vasquez handed Madison a bottle of water. "That was reckless." "It worked. Barely." But Vasquez was almost smiling. "You know, when Davidson said you were competent, I thought he was exaggerating. Turns out he was underselling." Madison drank half the bottle in one go. Her hands were shaking now, delayed adrenaline response perfectly normal after combat. She'd stopped noticing it years ago. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we process Holloway, build the case, and let federal prosecutors do what they do." Vasquez's expression softened. "And you get to go home, back to your life, whatever that looks like." Madison thought about that, about Riverside, about Dr. Brennan's offer, about the staff who'd followed her orders and lived because of it. "I think I know what it looks like," she said quietly. The sun was rising when Madison finally made it back to Riverside. The hospital looked different in dawn light, less threatening, more tired, like it had been through something traumatic and was still figuring out how to recover. Patricia was waiting in her office, looking like she hadn't slept. "Ms. Cole, I heard about last night. News travels fast. Federal agents raiding a hospital consultant tends to make headlines." Patricia gestured to a chair. "Sit, please." Madison sat, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. The adrenaline had worn off hours ago, leaving only aches and the kind of bone-deep fatigue that came from running on survival instinct. "I'm resigning," Patricia said abruptly. "I told you that before, but I wanted you to hear it officially. The board accepted my resignation this morning. They're conducting a full review of hospital operations and implementing new oversight protocols." "That's probably for the best." "It is. But before I go, I need to say something." Patricia met Madison's eyes. "I failed you. I failed this hospital. I let bad people operate unchecked because I was more concerned about legal liability than moral responsibility, and that's unforgivable." Madison didn't know what to say to that. "But you," Patricia continued, "you did what I should have done. You stood up when standing up was dangerous. You fought when fighting meant risking everything. And you saved lives that would have been lost if you just followed orders and stayed quiet." "I just did what needed doing." "That's exactly my point. You saw what needed doing, and you did it. No committee meetings, no risk assessment, just action based on competence and courage." Patricia pulled out an envelope, slid it across the desk. "This is a letter of recommendation. For any position you want, anywhere you want to go. If you choose to leave Riverside, I want to make sure you have options." Madison opened the envelope. The letter was comprehensive, glowing, the kind of recommendation that opened doors. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me. I'm just trying to do one thing right before I leave." Patricia stood. "For what it's worth, I hope you stay. This place needs people like you more than it needs people like me." She left before Madison could respond. Dr. Brennan found Madison in the break room an hour later, drinking terrible coffee and staring at nothing. "You look like hell," Brennan said. "Feel worse. I heard about the ambush, and the firefight, and the part where you apparently went full commando on 5 armed hostiles." Brennan poured herself coffee. "Remind me never to piss you off." Madison managed a tired smile. "I'll try not to take it personally." "Good, because I still want you for that clinical liaison position." Brennan sat down across from her. "I know you've had a rough few days. I know you've probably got job offers from every federal agency in the country after what you did. But I'm asking anyway, stay here. Help me fix this place." "Why?" "Because hospitals need people who actually care about patients more than politics. People who'll do the right thing even when it's hard. People who won't back down when someone tells them they're overstepping." Brennan's expression was serious. "You proved you're that person, multiple times. So I'm asking, will you stay?" Madison thought about it, about the last 4 years of trying to find somewhere she belonged.
about the military career she'd left behind because she was tired of watching people die in places nobody cared about the quiet civilian life that had turned out to be anything but quiet. What would the position actually involve? She asked. Coordinating emergency response protocols, training staff on mass casualty procedures, liaison between nursing and physician teams during critical incidents. Basically, what you've already been doing except with authority and a salary that reflects the value. And if I disagree with an attending physician's orders, then you escalate to me and we sort it out like professionals. No retaliation, no intimidation, just medicine based on evidence and experience. Brennan paused. I can't promise it'll be perfect. This hospital has problems that won't fix themselves overnight. But I can promise you'll have support and autonomy to do what's right. Madison drank her coffee. It was still terrible, but somehow that felt appropriate. 24 hours, she said. Let me think about it. That's all I'm asking. Madison spent those 24 hours doing normal things. She went home. She slept for 14 hours straight. She woke up, made breakfast, and sat on her apartment balcony watching traffic flow past while her phone buzzed with messages she mostly ignored. Colonel Davidson called around noon. Lieutenant, just wanted to check in. How are you holding up? Still breathing. That counts for something. More than something. You took down a major criminal network and survived a military-grade ambush. That's worth acknowledgement. Davidson paused. I also wanted to ask if you'd considered returning to active duty. Your service record is exemplary, and we could use someone with your skills. Madison watched a bird land on the railing. I appreciate that, sir, but I think I'm done with the military. Understandable, but if you change your mind, the door's open. Thank you. I mean that. One more thing. Webb's being released from Metro General tomorrow. He's going into witness protection until the trials are over. But he wanted me to pass along a message. He said to tell you that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what matters even when you are. Madison felt something tighten in her chest. Tell him I said good luck. Will do? And Cole? Whatever you decide to do next, civilian or military, hospital, or something else, you've got people who believe in you. Don't forget that. The call ended. Madison sat there for a long time, thinking about courage and fear and the difference between them, about the people who'd told her to stay quiet and the people who'd watched her refuse, about the fact that competence without authority was just frustration, but authority without competence was dangerous, and about what she actually wanted versus what other people expected her to want. She called Dr. Brennan at 6 p.m. I'll take the position, Madison said, but I have conditions. Name them. Full authority to implement new protocols without requiring board approval for every change. Direct access to you for any disputes that can't be resolved at the department level. And protection for any staff member who reports safety concerns, regardless of who it implicates. Brennan was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Done. When can you start? Monday. See you then. The public hearing happened 3 weeks later, held in Riverside's main auditorium because the boardroom wasn't big enough for the crowd. News cameras lined the back wall. Reporters filled half the seats. Hospital staff occupied the rest, along with community members who'd been patients or family during the mass casualty event. Madison sat in the front row, wearing professional clothes that still felt uncomfortable, watching as the board reviewed findings from the federal investigation. Harold Westbrook, guilty on 17 counts of medical fraud and conspiracy, currently in witness protection pending testimony against organized crime figures. Dr. Richard Kern, guilty on 12 counts of fraud and criminal conspiracy. Sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, medical license permanently revoked. Dr. Marcus Holloway, guilty on 23 counts, including attempted murder, conspiracy, and weapons charges. Sentenced to 35 years without parole. The charges were read aloud, dry and clinical, but Madison felt each one like vindication. Then the board chair called her name. Ms. Madison Cole, please approach. Madison stood, walked to the front of the auditorium, very aware of every eye watching her. The board chair, a woman in her 60s, silver-haired and formal, held up a framed certificate. Ms. Cole, on behalf of Riverside General Hospital and the community we serve, I want to publicly acknowledge your extraordinary service during the recent crisis. Your actions during the mass casualty event directly saved at least 15 lives according to medical review. Your coordination of emergency response prevented what could have been a catastrophic failure of care.
And your role in exposing criminal activity within our institution has allowed us to implement reforms that will protect patients for years to come. Scattered applause. It grew louder. Therefore, the board is pleased to present you with Riverside's highest civilian honor, the Lifesaver Medal, awarded to individuals who demonstrate exceptional courage and competence in protecting human life. She pinned the medal to Madison's jacket. The applause became overwhelming. Madison looked out at the crowd, at Amy, who was crying and clapping, at Janet, who gave a firm nod, at Dr. Brennan, who looked genuinely pleased, at Patricia, sitting in the back, who mouthed thank you across the distance, and at the families of patients who'd survived that day because someone had known what to do and hadn't been afraid to do it. When the applause finally died down, the board chair handed Madison a microphone. "Would you like to say anything?" Madison hadn't prepared a speech, hadn't expected to need one, but she took the microphone anyway because some things deserved to be said out loud. "I'm not a hero," she began, and several people started to object. She held up a hand. "I'm not. I'm just someone who was trained to save lives and given an opportunity to do it. The real heroes are the nurses who followed orders during chaos, even though they didn't know if those orders would work. The doctors who put ego aside and focused on patients. The staff who showed up the next day despite being traumatized and exhausted. Those people are the ones who make hospitals work." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I spent 4 years in the military learning how to keep people alive in impossible situations. And I learned something important. Competence without courage is useless. Courage without competence is dangerous. You need both. You need people willing to act and skilled enough to act correctly. And you need systems that support those people instead of punishing them for doing what's right." Madison looked directly at the board members. Riverside failed that test. It created an environment where speaking up meant retaliation and staying quiet meant safety. Where protecting reputation mattered more than protecting patients. Where bad people could operate unchecked because nobody wanted to make waves. She softened her voice slightly. "But that can change. It is changing because we're choosing to be better." She set the microphone down and returned to her seat while the applause started again. After the ceremony, Madison found herself surrounded by people wanting to thank her, to shake her hand, to tell her about family members who'd survived that day because of what she'd done. One man, middle-aged, wearing an ill-fitting suit, pushed through the crowd. "Ms. Cole, I don't know if you remember me. My wife was in bed 7, the one who grabbed your wrist." Madison remembered. "How is she?" "Good. Better than good. The cardiologist found a blockage during the tests after the incident. They put in a stent. Doctor said if they hadn't caught it, she would have had a massive heart attack within weeks." His voice cracked. "You told her you'd check on him every 20 minutes, and you did. Even during everything else that was happening, you kept that promise. It was my job. It was more than that. It was you seeing her as a person instead of just another case." He held out his hand. "Thank you for everything." Madison shook it, not trusting herself to speak. The crowd eventually dispersed. Madison was gathering her things when Dr. Brennan appeared. "Ready for Monday?" Brennan asked. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Good, because we've got a full schedule. Staff training, protocol review. And apparently the board wants you to develop a hospital-wide emergency response curriculum." Brennan smiled slightly. "You're going to be busy." "I can handle busy." "I know. That's why I hired you." Madison left Riverside as the sun was setting, medal still pinned to her jacket, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Not the manufactured purpose of following orders or fitting into systems designed by other people. Real purpose. The kind that came from knowing your skills mattered and your voice would be heard and the work you did actually changed outcomes. Her phone buzzed. Text from Amy. "Drinks tonight to celebrate? The whole ER team wants to buy you a round. Or 12. Madison smiled and typed back. "I'll take one. Maybe 2. But I need to be functional tomorrow. Deal. See you at McGinty's at 8. She drove home through familiar streets that felt different now. Less temporary. More like somewhere she might actually stay. Inside her apartment, Madison finally started unpacking the boxes she'd been living around for months. Pictures went on walls. Books went on shelves. The space slowly transformed from temporary housing into something that resembled a home. She hung her military awards in the bedroom, not hidden, but not displayed prominently either. They were part of her history,
But they weren't her whole story. The Lifesaver Medal went on the bookshelf where she'd see it every day. A reminder that competence and courage weren't military qualities. They were human qualities. And they mattered just as much in hospitals as they did in combat zones. Maybe more. Because in hospitals, you got to see the people you saved actually recover. Got to watch them walk out and return to their lives. Got to know that the chaos and fear and impossible decisions had meant something beyond mission objectives and strategic outcomes. Got to know you'd made a difference. Madison's phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Cole? Lieutenant Cole, this is Captain Barnes. We spoke during the convoy incident. Captain, what can I do for you?
I wanted to follow up on Colonel Davidson's offer. We're forming a civilian emergency medical task force, experienced combat medics who can deploy to disaster zones and provide advanced care where infrastructure has collapsed. The pay is competitive, the work is meaningful, and we need people with your skill set. Madison looked around her apartment, at the unpacked boxes, at the metal on the shelf, at the life she was building. I appreciate the offer, Captain, but I'm exactly where I need to be. Understood. But if you ever change your mind, I'll let you know. Thank you. She ended the call and finished unpacking. Later that night, at McGinty's, surrounded by ER staff who'd become something like friends, Madison raised her glass in response to far too many toasts and tried not to think too hard about how much had changed in 4 weeks. Amy clinked her beer against Madison's. To the most badass nurse in Ashford Heights. I'm not badass, I'm just competent. Same thing, Janet said from across the table, especially when everyone else is panicking. To competence then, Madison said, and to not panicking. They drank to that. Someone asked Madison to tell the story of the ambush. She deflected, redirected, and eventually escaped to the bar for another drink. Dr. Brennan was there, nursing whiskey and looking tired. You did good today, Brennan said. The speech, the ceremony, all of it. I just said what needed saying, which is exactly why it mattered. Brennan finished her drink. You know, when I took over the ER, I had about a dozen people tell me I was making a mistake offering you that position, that you were too aggressive, too independent, too willing to challenge authority. And I told them that aggressive and independent were exactly what we needed, that challenging bad authority was the only way to establish good authority. Brennan smiled. They're starting to figure that out. Madison ordered another drink. Can I ask you something? Shoot. Why'd you really hire me? Not the official reasons, the real ones. Brennan considered the question. Because I've been working in hospitals for 20 years, and I've watched good people get crushed by bad systems. Watched competence get punished because it made incompetence look bad. Watched people who cared burn out and quit because nobody supported them. She met Madison's eyes. And then I watched you walk into the worst crisis this hospital has seen and handle it like it was just another Tuesday. No hesitation, no self-doubt, just clear-eyed assessment and immediate action. That's not something you can teach. That's something you either have or you don't. And we need more people who have it. I'm not special. You're exactly special enough, which is different from being perfect or invincible or any other impossible standard. Brennan stood. Get some rest, Cole. Monday's going to come fast. She left. Madison stayed at the bar, finishing her drink, thinking about perfection and impossibility and the space between them where real people actually lived. Her phone buzzed one more time. Text from a number she didn't recognize but instinctively knew was Webb. I heard about the ceremony. Congratulations. You earned it. And thank you for not giving up on me even when everyone else had. Some people are worth saving. You taught me that. Madison typed back. You were worth the effort. Stay safe. You too, Lieutenant. She pocketed her phone and returned to the table where her colleagues were arguing about football and swapping stories and behaving like people who'd survived something terrible and come out stronger. And for the first time in years, Madison Cole felt like she belonged somewhere. Not because she'd proven herself in combat, not because she'd won medals or saved lives or brought down criminals, but because she'd stood up when standing up mattered, because she'd refused to be invisible when visibility was dangerous, because she'd chosen competence over compliance and courage over caution, because she'd been exactly who she was, without apology or compromise. And that had been enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. 2 months later, Madison stood in Riverside's newly renovated emergency department.
watching the organized chaos of a normal Tuesday evening. New protocols were working, staff morale was up, patient outcomes were improving. The changes she'd recommended were being implemented one by one, slowly transforming the department from a place that punished initiative into a place that rewarded it. Amy approached with a chart. Bay 3 needs an assessment, possible appendicitis. I'll take a look. Madison walked through the department, her department now in all the ways that mattered, and thought about how strange it was that crisis could lead to transformation, that the worst day of her professional life had somehow become the beginning of the best chapter. She'd learned something important in the years since leaving the military, something that combat had taught her but civilian life had refined. Courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about being afraid and acting anyway. Competence wasn't about being perfect. It was about being skilled enough to handle imperfection. And justice wasn't something that happened automatically. It was something you had to fight for. Every single day, in small ways and large ones. By refusing to accept systems that protected the wrong people and punished the right ones. By being the person who stood up when everyone else stayed seated. By believing that one person, acting with courage and competence, could actually change things. Madison Cole had been invisible for 19 days, but she'd been visible ever since, and she wasn't planning to stop.